Hello. Welcome back to my, apparently this is becoming sort of a real channel, which is wild to me. I keep thinking of things to say, which isn't atypical of me. I said atypical, by the way, because I do have things to say, like, all the time. I got a really nice comment on my YouTube video. I think my first one, like, journey through the NF mistypes. Oh, I have someone. INT jerk. Hi. I was saying that I had a really nice comment on one of my three YouTube videos. Basically saying that my voice was magical and this felt like a radio show, and it made me feel better about the fact that I'm not adding a visual component to this right now. I don't know about any of you, but I really, really enjoy podcasts, and I feel like I get deeper into the material when I'm not focusing on audio and visual at the same time. So maybe this will be cool for some of you too. And that comment was from ENFP Perspectives. Check out his channel if you haven't already. So I guess you can see from the title, I wanted to talk about ENFJ spirituality today because I feel like INFJ spirituality gets a lot of attention. INFP to an extent as well, just by virtue of being NFP. I wanted to whisper this content because I feel the urge to make an ASMR video at some point. But for now, we'll keep it to my regular speaking voice, I guess. So, I mean, I wrote literally 2 jot notes before I wanted to get started on this, thinking like, this will prepare me so much. I love preparation and I strive for it, but I'm not as well prepared as maybe some other types might be for stuff. So I guess I'll start with the fact that we always think of NI as being like the most spiritual function, and maybe everyone doesn't always think this, but it certainly, I feel, has that rep. And this was a little bit, I think this led to some of my own mistyping as INFJ instead, because I said before, like, I'm a heavy NI user. And I get it, spirituality deals with the perceivably immaterial. It requires a lot of reflection, and it requires like spiritualism, at least. I can't really speak for religion, especially not growing up religious, but spiritualism, especially like modern, like New Age type of thought, there's a sense of understanding the universe as as parts of a whole. How you define that whole is different, a little bit different for everyone. Oh, I got a comment. My dad, ENFJ, is a heavy NI user. He's also a pastor. Yeah, I find there's a church in my town here, and I worked there for a while. And I think she's a reverend. That was her designation. She, I feel, was definitely like your classic ENFJ. I was really shy at church, actually, so I mean, it was interesting to see, but yeah, for sure. Like, I think maybe heavy NI users in healthier ENFJs, I mean, have more of a kind of a spiritual direction. Like, I always feel like, even though I'm going inward a lot when I'm thinking about spiritual concepts, that I'm on sort of a mission, but not in a missionary type of way, but just that I'm trying to eventually accomplish something. Like, I love to mull on ideas for a really long time, but what I think about does have a goal, if that makes sense. I'm not an expert on the functions yet as of this point. but I feel like I'm starting to grok it a bit. So if I am using any of them incorrectly in descriptions or whatever examples, like, feel free to correct me. I'm doing my best. My weak TI is trying, okay? But as far as I understand thus far, like, SI is a lot about perceiving like the internal. I'm no expert, lol. True. Same. SI is kind of about exploring the um, internal practical sensory realities as well. Like, I see it associated with like with history a lot. And when I think of history, I think of like dates and facts, and I guess there's elements of that, but just also of having an internal. There seems to be like an internal sense of like linear time, but also just like a certain sense of um, I feel like SE is more living in the moment, quote unquote, and having like pure sensory experiences, which is like equally valuable, obviously, in different ways. But to me, from my understanding so far, SI deals a lot with kind of being almost unconsciously in a way, like it's not a strained effort, in tune with um, the things you need to function better, maybe. Um, I'm just thinking of like one of my dearest friends is an ISFJ, and like he doesn't experience a lot of health problems, so it's not like he has to focus that much on it, but he has really strong senses of routine and like a really um, the older he gets, especially like a strong sense of what works for him and what doesn't. Um, yeah, I, well, have weak as shit SI, but I've been listening to other kind of spirity people talk about the magic and just the overall importance of embodiment, um, like as a theory, which is kind of ironic if you think about it, because literally, if you think about it, because it's something that's entered my awareness a lot, but I'm having trouble transferring my intellectual understanding of the magic of embodiment to practical realities, especially SI realities. It's hard for me to put it into practice. So um, to use more SE examples if I can, like um, for example, oh, I have the same problem, says INT Jerk. Yeah, I forget. Where is SI in your stack of 8? I can't remember off the top of my head for INTJ. I should know this. I've dated an INTJ or two, but not when I was into MBTI, mind you, but still. It depends on how it is laid out. Okay. Yeah. Okay, I'll try. Some say last, some say second to last. Oh, is that depending on like whether or not we're talking about socionics? I haven't even gone into socionics yet, really. Like, I've kind of skimmed through socionics a bit, and I think it's really interesting, and I think eventually I'll get a lot out of it. But right now I'm just kind of trying to hone a basic, like a more concrete understanding of like MBTI in action, because the theory all makes perfect sense to me, but like applying it is where I start to struggle. I think that's probably like lower SE and TI, maybe. I don't know. Anyway, I appreciate the comments. Thank you. It helps me continue. I get nervous filming these because I worry about my own pauses and like running out of things to say, but weirdly enough, like, that's your focused on I. What's my focused on I? Sorry. That's such an ironic thing for me to say. Sorry. But yeah, I worry about my pauses. Oh, as I see what you're saying. Right. Duh. Um, yeah, and I think being an extrovert, like especially in ENFJ, when other people are being receptive to my information. Oh, honing in on MBTI only is my focused on I. Absolutely. I can become a bit of an information slut like in the moment where I have like 15 tabs open at once, but I'm pretty much only focusing on like a few specific, very holistic, but a few specific ideas at the time. Like, right, a lot of the things I'm looking up have to do with like body health and stuff. And that's kind of what's forced me to pay attention to SI and to value it more is just um, the the sheer amount of like distress my body has gone through from not taking care of it and taking care of my emotional health. And I think that is pushing me to grow spiritually as well. So that's also why I felt compelled to make this video. But I was just saying to finish my other thought, like that having other people around to listen to what I'm saying makes me say it a lot more clearly because it's easier for my brain to think to anticipate someone else's needs than if no one is around like in real time to receive it. I kind of find I just even editorialize my own thoughts more, if that makes sense. um, what faith or belief are you? um Interesting that you asked because I was going to touch on a bit on this later. I am actually trying to get really in touch with the spiritualities of my own ancestors. I feel like that's really important work to do for lots of practical, but also like justice oriented reasons. And just because those are the things that are going to resonate deepest in your body because it's built into your DNA. Like, we understand that trauma, like PTSD, is even passed down genetically, generation through generation. A lot of our instincts now are genetic memories from our ancestors. So, it's if you're sensitive and tapped into those kinds of intuitions, not in a Myers-Briggs sense necessarily, they're actually more senses. Um, I think understanding that power and like tapping into it is like really valuable. Um, so for me, I actually, a large chunk of my ancestry is like, if you go back to pre Christianity, like Saxon, which is not what I expected. I thought I would be more Celtic than that, considering how I look, but um, some of that has to do with my indigenous ancestry too. So, I mean, whatever. But I've been thinking about how, like, the Saxons in particular and like a lot of Germanic tribes were really brutal, and how that really crosses a pretty strong line in my own values and how I like to, my praxis, I guess you could say. Um, so I'm kind of just trying to, in a way, like righteously appropriate my own ancestors' shit, like taking the symbolism and the practices they had and applying them in ways that are like not shitty and oppressive to people. And I'm still brainstorming a lot of what that looks like. This is just like an idea that's entered my consciousness recently, but it's something I've been thinking about a lot. That was a really long answer, but I appreciate the question because I'm excited to like put out, probably not on this channel. I don't know what I'm really doing with this channel right now. It was just supposed to be a diary dumping ground, but people seem relatively interested in this stuff, I have to say, which is kind of nice. So we'll see. But I was planning on putting out like a zine about that to start, kind of as a guide. I want to help people figure out how to do that work because I felt like I was stuck on figuring out how to do it for so long. But I've kind of learned how to work with the medium of ancestry.com in particular. I sent in like DNA testing to 23andMe and I'm waiting on the results. More for my health profile too, but we'll see. Very interesting. INTJ Jerk says, thank you. Let me just look at my notes for a second and see. Oh, another point that I had written down. I guess I'll go into now. I'm really good at rambling. So sorry. I was wondering, like, so 2 of my videos right now, one of them is like 45 odd minutes and one of them is like 30 something odd minutes. I was self-conscious about releasing videos that long because I was like, God, does anyone even care to sit down for that long? But ENFP Perspectives, hello, double shout out, mentioned that he like laid down and listened to it. And I love the idea of people enjoying it that way. So, I mean, I'm open to feedback about what formats work for everyone. I'm good at listening, LOL. Thank you. I'm great at talking. I'm good at listening too, but I have to make sure to turn off talk mode to do it sometimes. But I don't know if you find this. Like you're an introvert, so you might experience like a reverse or something. But like if I'm listening to someone, especially if someone's telling an experience of what's happened to them, like something really SE oriented, like and their feelings about it, I just sit there and like listen kind of with my mouth hanging open, like really absorbing like every vivid detail. And then when they're done, like it takes me a while to kind of process what I think about it or like how to respond at all, or like in a way that is like helpful or conducive or to the conversation or to like them personally. Yeah, like so it's hard for me to like jump back and forth from mode to mode. Like it's either like long form monologuing or like quick back and forth comparing and contrasting experiences is like a mode of dialogue that works for me. Yeah. I'm still figuring out how MBTI relates to the things I experience. I usually zone out mid-story. True. You said you were good at listening. No. I have that too. Drop a comment if you want about like why that is or what makes it easier for you to listen. I'm curious because MBTI is an interest a lot of different people have, so I realize more people may be listening to my stuff than the types of people I'm used to associating with, so it's nice to hear what works well for people. Anyway, this is a video about spirituality, particularly ENFJ spirituality, so the can of worms I wanted to open was the idea of animism, like that is, call it a philosophy. I like to think of it as an embodiment because it's very much like, yeah, sure, it's an idea, but it's an idea that demands a particular way of living, because it's not just the idea isolated that you believe that kind of everything is alive in its own way. Sure, that in itself is animism, I guess, but really believing that and understanding that requires you to behave as if this is true. So how does knowing that everything is alive in its own way impact your behavior, your relationships, etc., etc.? Oh, I got another comment. Dominance, I think, is what makes me more apt to listen. As an INTJ, that would make sense for you. Cool. Thanks for the feedback. Yeah, what was I going to say? Animism. Yes. So the more I started to educate myself about how different types of flora, like plants, herbs, trees, etc., blah, 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 that they work, and realizing that they have their own kind of consciousness in the sense that they operate in intentional ways, often in cohesive ways with other members of their species, to perpetuate their own survival and comfort. Um, that's being alive. Shit. Fuck. Like, and like really understanding that has impacted the way I talk about plants, the way I interact with them. It may seem, the way I talk about plants may seem anthropomorphic to some people that maybe aren't as aware of those realities, but I mean, it's definitely probably maybe a bit more motivated to dive into that knowledge base, but I mean, it makes sense logically too. So I love when feeling and thinking as the semi-false dichotomy when they come together like that. Oh, so satisfying. And I wanted to talk about animism, not just because I like it or because it makes sense to me, or because even not just because I think it should make sense to other people, because I mean it should. But I know I have an INTJ listening to this right now, but for any ENFJs or like extroverted, especially extroverted feelers that may listen to this later, and I mean, introverts don't live on an island as much, like no man is an island kind of deal. So you have to interact too. This may be valuable information for you as well. Insight, whatever you want to call it. But I was just thinking about how I remember when I sent in a video of myself to INTJ and INFP coffee. And I sounded much more woo-woo when I was saying it because I was really like brain fried at the time from lack of sleep and shit. But I was talking about how, you gotta like enter a relationship with the flora and the fauna around you, blah, blah, blah. And I didn't really pause to explain it. So it may not have made sense to someone who doesn't already kind of think on that track or have those like feelings or experiences. But I thought it was interesting or I think it's interesting now because that's like the most ENFJ way to connect with nature. Like, I always had morals and values around protecting Mother Nature as a really young person, and was always attracted to esoteric arts and like earth-based spirituality and stuff. But like at the same time, as a kid who was always, extroverted, an extroverted feeler in particular, especially one with trauma, because this tends to activate the flight response more. But do you think those two are typed correctly? Oh, INFP and INTJ. I do. I can see how they may come off to some people as different types, but I think that they have really valuable insights, and like I've applied those insights to people that I've met, and they seem to hold up. And I think that they are open to feedback and like eager enough, both assuming like that they're FI users too, to like kind of do that reflection work. Also, just that I think that they, at least to me, come off as like pretty, regardless of anyone's private mental health struggles or not, but they come off to me as like really well-rounded people. So I think that can sometimes make it harder to type folks. I know Megan Lavoda had a video talking about how it's a lot harder to type people who are super healthy and people who are super unhealthy, because the former makes you well-rounded and the latter makes you fractured. So, I mean, but that's my hot take. Um, I mean, I'm open to differing opinions about it, but like, I trust them, is what I'm saying. And yeah, so, sorry, to get back to what I was saying about like spiritual shit, because that's this video. Sorry for the tangent. No, that's okay. I'm actually, for an NI user, like super tangential. Just as an NI user, I won't like bounce around from things. I'm like, oh, new rabbit hole, cool, and I'll just like I'll do a deep dive into it. So, but don't feel bad. Like, I think all like respectful questions are interesting and have like value. So, thanks. I just appreciate the interaction, honestly. So, cool. Um, that wasn't about you. That was more me feeling like TI criticism, self-conscious that I'm not pleasing the masses or something, or like the most people, but don't apologize for that. It was fine. Yeah. Oh, so I was saying to them in my video where I got typed as an ENFJ that, yeah, wanting to be in relationship with the flora and the fauna. And I was laughing now recently because that's such, I feel like probably an ENFJ, like extroverted feeler answer. Because, okay, so I do this thing where I like forget where I was, and if I'm able to remember what I was talking about, I kind of, it's like rewinding a video back a little bit too far and then like going kind of forward on a trajectory again. And I feel like I landed like right before where I left off. But anyway, um, it seems like tangents, but I just like to like explain as much of the picture as possible. That's heavy NI for you, I guess. Anyway, yeah. So as a kid, had great respect for Mother Earth, Parent Earth, whatever. And yet I had a hard time actually being with nature. I feel like this is something that comes a bit more naturally to introverts. But I used to say, like, oh, especially in my preteen years, in my teen years, like, oh, I want to live in the city. More NI rewinding. Yes. So I would say, like, oh, I want to live in the city. Like, um, I love how we haven't commented on my FE, but it's probably because you and I share NI that it's more like obvious. Plus, I'm like broadcasting my thoughts. So there's lots of NI activation. But yeah, so here's some FE shit. So I would say, like, oh, I want to live in a city because I need to be around people all the time. And why did I ever think I was an introvert? Oh my God. I mean, I went over that in a different video. So if you're really curious, go to my first one. But yeah, I want to live around people. Like, I love nature and it's so important, but I get so bored so fast. And what that really was about was like not feeling stimulated enough by conversation, by engagement. And that was just kind of like a spiritually bankrupt, not morally bankrupt because I was like a child, but it was spiritually bankrupt, a way of seeing my surroundings, my fellow beings as static and not alive and not interactive. I recently discovered that plants make sound, like trees in particular, was what I was reading about. I've seen a video of someone like recording and like translating through a device the sound of sunflowers making sound. I don't know if it was real, honestly, but like I believe it. Whatever. Like it was so cool. Saplings. God, I'll have to like grab my sources. I'm really bad at like crappy SI means I read something, I understand it, and then I forget where I read it, and then I just sound like I'm talking out my ass, but I promise I'm not. Please take my word for it at this current time. That, yeah, they make sound, which is so cool. We just can't hear it because it's like below 300 hertz or something. And, you know, I mean, a lot of indigenous societies have been saying this like forever anyway, and science is just catching up. And they also their roots will grow towards water because, based on sound. Because a group of ecologists, some kind of scientists, played water recordings and found like that they were growing towards it. So there's like, they're very much not just alive in the sense that they have cells, but that they have like intentional behavior, intelligent behavior. Like they have a sentience. It's just like not perceptible to us in the same way as in a literal kind of 5 sense scientific, until recently, scientific way. Oh no, I missed your comment. Sorry. I was like doing the NI thing and looking away. Let me see. Live chat. I actually have not. Oh. Plants communicate with one another as well. Yeah, they do it through their fungal, like, or not fungal, fuck. Mycelial networks, which just means like their roots and shit. Yeah, so now I'm a super plant nerd that I understand it through like a quote unquote like human lens. But I think to call it a human lens, paradoxically, is human centric in a way, because like a lot of the things that we ascribe to being human specific with regards to like consciousness and embodiment are actually shared by lots of different species. But so I'd like to create a new word for it at some point, but for now that's all I have off the top of my head. Like when I relational, I guess, when I had a relational framework for understanding like natural beings around me, it really made me appreciate spending time in nature, because it transformed from a value to a value motivated experience. So now when I spend time in nature, I feel like and sometimes literally out loud, I don't care if it makes me look crazy. I'm crazy. I don't give a fuck. So, okay, I give a little bit of a fuck. That FE cares a little bit. But in my heart of hearts, leave me alone. I'll do whatever. But I go out into the world, outdoors. I live in a small town right now, so there's like lots of, it's still very much a town, but there's lots of natural scenery around me. And I can almost like have like literal and sometimes nonverbal, sometimes verbal conversations with them. And it leads me to some pretty surprising insights at times. Yeah, and I think it's interesting just because like we always think of like in modern Western, like specifically white social circles, society, whatever, we think of spending time in nature as an introverted activity. And like, sure, in terms of the idea of isolating from other human beings, but if you are consciously aware and engaging on that level, it can be an extroverted experience too. It's definitely different than like engaging with human beings, but talking to plants, like observing them and like giving them nutrients. Here, have my orange peel. Here, have some water. Listen to my voice, whatever. Those are all active social interactions. And I find that I'm the most grounded and centered when I remember to do those things. And I think, you know, maybe extroverts understand that better than I do, or like understood it before me. I don't know. I'd have to talk to some. But I think Pikoki and I are gonna chat pretty soon, which is exciting. So maybe, I don't know, she'll have insight on that, which would be cool. Yeah. And I wanted to say this not just to express my experience, as although I love doing that probably more than your average ENFJ. Through life experience, I've learned to use FI a lot. And just through like being, oops, I dropped my pencil. Just through being, I think being autistic sometimes leads you to be like more in touch with your FI than maybe non-autistic FE users, and I can talk about that another time. But anyway, I forget what the fuck I was saying. Oh, the reason I wanted to talk about animism being a consciously extroverted experience was because I think it might be easy, even for like ENFs, I guess, to forget or maybe not even bother to tap into that level of interactive reality, or feel like they aren't going to get as much out of it as an introvert might. So this is all just to say that I don't think it's fair. INFJs have the NFJ monopoly on being like super spiritual, you know? Fuck. I mean, yeah, I'm a heavy NI user, sure, but I think I use FE a lot in my spirituality too, and like I have like a basic understanding of the chakra system. It's not my system to use, like I'm not of that heritage, but it's another way of kind of organizing consciousness and embodiment. And like I find I'm a very heart-centered person. INTJ Jerk was like, are you not pretty introverted? Yes and no. Like I have these thoughts a lot and I'm comfortable sitting with them for long periods of time, sure, but like I feel the need to share them externally a lot, and I need attention and validation like all the time. And I it's a bit easier to keep my NI to myself than my FE, but I still feel very motivated to like do something with this information. It's hard for me to actually do it, which is why like education works really well for me, I guess, because like it's a type of action, but it doesn't require like too much like SI detail organization. That's why I love being friends with SI users. My ISFJ friend is going to help me with business stuff later. God fucking bless. Yeah, and obviously, I don't know if you can tell from the tone of my voice, but I'm like super, when I get really into something, I'm like really expressive. So, but yeah, cool that you brought that up, because I've I've definitely had to ask myself that too. I guess in terms of like through Myers-Briggs, we know that there's no such thing as like an ambivert, because your dominant function is either going to be introverted or extroverted. But if we're measuring like quantity of time spent interacting with other people, I get, yeah, like I would run towards the ambiverted spectrum. I think ENFPs are also like that, and yeah, I've heard that about some ENFJs too. I I made another ENFJ friend recently, and we've talked a lot here and there, like on Messenger, and I messaged her to video chat a couple of days ago, and we had never spoken like live to each other, but we spent like 4.5 hours on the phone, and I could do that every day, and I have to remind myself to actually disengage sometimes for my own like mental health and sense of groundedness. So there's that answer. Sorry, that was super long. Also, fucking NI shit. Damn. But yeah, this is all just a 40-minute so far reminder to find ways to engage. I feel like I have a lot of trauma related to SI personally, but like a lot of medical trauma, and fear of things that happen to bodies and that bodies experience internally. If I'm classifying that correctly as SI, I'm not sure. But I gave this example on a podcast episode that I recorded with someone else that's going to come out fairly soon, but I'll restate it here. Like, one time I was preparing a whole chicken for myself. This was like last month or so, I think. And I was suddenly really aware as I was rinsing it that it was a body, and it grossed me out for a minute. I'm pretty squeamish. Like, yeah. I am fine, and then suddenly I hit a wall, and I'm like, whoa. So I hit a wall there for a minute, and instead of kind of like flinching and like gritting my teeth and getting through the moment, I was like, oh my God, this is an opportunity to practice embodiment and like to lean into fear. Because I feel like my whole fucking life is run by fear. I'm such an anxious person in every way. So, which is why it's important for me to spiritually develop and like learn how to let go of that ego and etc. etc. I think NFJs in general harbor a lot of particular fear. But anyway, I just like held the body or the chicken body under the running water and thought I it was like I was having a conversation but with myself rather than just like having these introverted thoughts running through my head, you know? And I was just like, okay, I kind of decided to even engage SE, and I was like feeling the texture, and then I kind of brought it into NI, where I thought, thank you, like universe, whatever, for gifting me with this life that's now giving me life, and just understanding like how cyclical and interdependent that was, and like having conscious gratitude for it. And then also understanding the big perspective of like how, you know, my ancestors did this all the time and were much more directly involved with their food sources and their meat sources in particular. And I just felt like grateful to kind of be a part of that huge chain. And when I understood the importance and the value in that, and like the greater like NI kind of benefit, it really paired with conscious positive SE experiencing, I guess, it really I kind of enjoy those moments with my meat preparation. I only eat flesh meat right now still. I haven't gotten to offal yet, but like organ meat one day. But for now, it's something I kind of enjoy handling, like tapping into those I don't want to say animal or primal, because I feel like that has like negative hierarchical connotations, but those natural instincts in a very loving and grateful and resource conscious way. Like, I feel like there are a lot of, I don't know, maybe like prepper types of people that are like, here's my dinner, bitch, and like just wanna kill their kill and treat it kind of like a trophy. Um, and I think it's okay to be proud of, you know, self sustenance and everything, like totally. But I also recognize like how profound it is to give a life for life. And like, I want to stay humble about that. So I think I, I'm sure INFJs have probably also had very similar realizations. Probably other types too, but just that specific, not just interconnectedness of ideas, but of like actual beings is so important to my own spirituality and probably spirituality for other ENFJs. So, for any ENFJs and I don't know, anyone else who any of this resonates with, I guess, like, but I'm gonna say ENFJs because A, my Myers Briggs understanding is still rusty as shit, and B, I'm an ENFJ. But, um, if you're feeling spiritually blank, try to understand the earth and the ether and all of the beings within it as interdependent, and allow that to fill you up with love and gratitude as quickly or as slowly as you need to. And you might find that moving through this world gets a little bit easier and a little bit more, I don't know, empowering, I guess. I think I'm going to end it here because I'm at 47 minutes. And I had 2 viewers for a second, one of them left. And obviously I was like, it's because I'm boring, but people are allowed to leave and come in and out whenever they please. Like, that's cool. But still, I'm gonna wrap it up because I think I said a lot in a really condensed way, despite this being a long ass video. Thanks to INT Jerk for staying with me throughout and for giving cool feedback. I hope anyone, you're not boring. Thank you. I I suck at taking compliments, but I still love them. Thank you, Gary. Hi, Gary. Shout out to Gary for sticking with me this whole time. And for anyone who's listening in the future, I never know how to end this shit. I always just say, like, I hope you're having a good day in some way. I try to be fancy and original. But, like, really, I just hope you're having a good time. I really do. Tune in next time, whenever that may be. Feel free to drop comments about be nice to me, but also just like what you like, what you'd like to hear from me. I would like this to be mutual engagement with anyone who listens to this shit. So yeah, please, I'd love it. Okay. Take care, Gary. Take care, future viewers. It's night where I am, so good night.